So this next question comes to me from Jennifer, and she works at an established company with a large patent portfolio. They've been trying to reduce their patent spend, so they're looking to jettison a bunch of patents, ones that are in work, ones that have already been issued and they're just paying annuities on. But in any event, they're trying to reduce their costs. And the question that came up was, how about monetization? And monetization is just a fancy word, so as to say, we're going to somehow try and make money off these patents. And there's many ways to go about doing them. You might go and assert your patents, sue somebody for infringement. You might try and license your patents, see if anybody's interested in getting the ability to practice, or maybe an exclusive license where they would have everything but ownership. Or you might want to outright sell them to people. And at big companies, it's very tantalizing. The prospect that the legal department would actually generate revenue is very tantalizing. And people will point out examples of large companies with huge patent portfolios, like IBM comes to mind, and they regularly make a large amount of money on licensing their patents. And the attractiveness of that prospect is just irresistible. So let's talk about it for a minute, because there are some moving parts associated with it. So first and foremost, if you go to enforce your patents, right, or license them, which is a threat to enforce, but we'll give you a license. But say you go down that road, a lot of people will react by countersuing you. So if you're a going concern like this company was, meaning that they have product, they're in business, they're not a dead company. Anybody you approach, their natural reaction will be to look at their portfolio. They keep it for defensive purposes, i.e. when you attack them, they will defend with that patent portfolio. And they will think about countersuing you. So when you were just trying to make a little bit of money, all of a sudden you're in a patent lawsuit and you're spending a tremendous amount of money litigating that lawsuit. So it would have the reverse effect. And a lot of going concerns don't like to think about monetization because of that countersuit risk. There are exceptions to that. It's like sometimes you can find a nascent area, an area where you no longer practice. You shut down that division, product's no longer being sold, but you still have these patents, right? There, I think it's a lot less threatening in the sense that if somebody has a defensive patent portfolio that they think about asserting against you, well, you no longer make the product. So the risk of countersuit is lower in that circumstance. Another thing you might do is get out in front of that, is before you shut down that factory or shut down that product line, package it up as a little spin out, roll the patents into it, and then the patents will certainly enhance the value in that circumstance. And it's much easier for people to comprehend the purchase of a business that has a potential revenue stream and so forth, maybe customers, it's a going concern. And then the patents are just a sweetener on that to protect their investment in that area. Absolutely, that makes perfectly good sense. And going concerns can do that all the time, and they should be thinking about that first and foremost. And the other little areas where you might have no more business in that area, so the countersuit risk is very small. Yeah, there are these huge tech companies. I mentioned IBM earlier, where they have patent portfolios that are just insurmountable, such that this countersuit risk is not very real in the sense that they can roll out wheelbarrows full of patents and stacks up to the ceiling. So the thought that you might countersue them, well, they'll just countersue you on 10 times more. And IBM certainly is in that position. These companies with just, if you're a top 10 patent filer, for example, like IBM is, and several other companies, you can approach licensing or monetization in a very low risk way. And it's not uncommon for these big, huge companies. IBM, most of their patents are for sale. Often they'll get rid of big tranches of them, try and sell them off cheaply. HP, I believe, that does that also. There's many large companies like that. And sometimes when you're trying to build up a patent portfolio very quickly, that's something you might rely upon. You know, Facebook, when it was approached by, approached by Yahoo, it was sued by Yahoo, very quickly they were able to amass a huge patent portfolio by reaching out to IBM. And then Microsoft had a big stable of patents, largely left over from when they acquired the patents from AOL. So very quickly, overnight, they were able to write, checks for very large sums of money and do this pre-IPO to set up that countersuit problem with Yahoo and get them to back down from their assertion position. The other thing to think about is putting them up for sale, and often you can do this in an innocuous way. Some of the bigger companies will have licensing executives that they'll hire that are just regularly selling stuff. And sale is a little bit less threatening in the sense that, if you're asserting, you're certainly threatening a lawsuit. If you're licensing, you're kind of threatening a lawsuit. It has a nicer word, but really it's like, take a license or we're going to sue you is the narrative. But when you put things up for sale, and there's been auctions in the past, there's lots of brokers that are involved in this area, and they'll try and facilitate these transfers, but it's a lot less threatening in the sense that, look, we're selling these patents, come and buy them. There's no risk that we're going to sue you because they're up for sale. But you may want to buy them because they're up for sale, and somebody else may buy them, and then they may assert them or something. That's easier to do, and a lot less risk in that circumstance. But one thing to be aware of is that brokers today, it used to be they might do this on contingency and take a portion of the revenue. That's pretty rare today. Generally, they want some money to put together a marketing package so that they can go around and explain to people the value of the portfolio, and they want you to pay that up front. And those costs can be, not insignificant. And while you're going about doing this, sometimes it can take a year or two to place a portfolio of patents. During that time period, you still have to pay maintenance fees. There still may be prosecution costs for unissued patents. Generally, they're sold one family at a time. That's kind of how people like to do that rather than breaking up a family. And by family, I mean priority claim to each other. It might be foreign equivalents or continuations or something like that. So it can take a little bit of time, and if you're trying to reduce costs, like Jennifer was, you have to spend money not only to maintain the patents, but then also perhaps pay for these marketing packages to be developed. And the whole time you're trying to reduce costs. But a company might get in a normal cadence where, some big cost is coming up, right? Like an annuity payment. They might back out from that, get direction from the executives whether or not they want to keep that patent family or not. And if they don't, then you might look at the prospect of selling that portfolio off or looking at some way to monetize it. And by doing that, and being selective about the ones that you invest for marketing packages put together, I could imagine that you would have a monetization program where you could could make money. And that was my advice to her, is to think about that as part of the process. But be aware that you have to start that early. There's ongoing costs. And really, the heyday of selling patents, they used to sell pretty regularly a patent family for a 7-figure amount. And they do in certain areas, life sciences, chemistry, certain areas where the value proposition of a patent is very clear. In the tech area where I practice, software and electronics, it's a little less clear. And the ability to assert a patent successfully and get large damages has become a lot less likely. So the prices people are getting are far less. I would expect a patent family to go for the low 6 figures versus when they could go 10 years ago for 7 figures pretty regularly. So those are my thoughts on monetization. If there's something that I didn't cover in that discussion, add it to the comments down below, and we'll talk to you next week.